So, in this video, I want to talk a little bit about what it is that I do to work through some of my different issues, like working through a fear or insecurity, maybe some type of anxiety that I might have, or even working through points of sadness from my past. So one of the methods that I use that I've found very helpful is basically called the emotional freedom technique. It's also known as tapping. So basically it's about tapping different meridians on the body, mainly around the head and face, and then a little bit on the chest and then under the armpit, that help to, while dealing or while working through a feeling that I'm experiencing in the moment. So the beauty of this method is that it allows you to get into the actual thought mode of the experience of the feeling that is causing you the problem. So for example, let's say that you have a fear of swimming or a fear of water. Getting into water or being around water, maybe in a sense of like going into the ocean or into a pool. Maybe that's something that's a fear of yours, and because maybe you don't know how to swim, or you've had a bad experience at some point in your childhood or something like that has caused you to have this fear of water. So one of the things that you can do is use this emotional freedom technique by imagining yourself being in a situation near or in water that would cause you to have anxiety or fear about it, to where you're actually feeling it, okay? And then basically at that point, what you do is you verbalize what you feel and then tap through it. But the first thing that you typically do with this is you start with this, they call it the karate chop point on your hand, and you'll say, even though I have this fear of water, I deeply and completely love and accept myself. And you do that a couple more times. Even though I have this fear of water, I deeply and completely love and accept myself. And you might vary up the way you say, you might say, even though I'm scared shitless of water, because I think I might drown, I deeply and completely love and accept myself. And then once you've done that, that's kind of like the prep cycle. Then you go into tapping on the meridians. So you'd say, this fear of water. I feel this fear. And you can close your eyes if it helps you to imagine it more and just get into the feeling of it. So the idea is that you want to sink into the feeling of that fear or whatever that is, the sadness, the anxiety, the depression, whatever, and just feel it within the body. And as you do that, as you're tapping, you allow yourself to feel it, and the tapping helps it to basically dissipate over time. So I do this. There's different ways that people recommend doing this. The way I've done it typically has just been to tap and tap and tap and tap and do multiple cycles of it until I feel myself yawning or sighing or crying or whatever it is. And that is when you start to experience the release, when you have some kind of actual physiological response to this. And usually I'll have I feel this deep breath that I need to take, or I yawn or whatever, like that. And then I'll notice that it starts to dissipate. And then I just keep going through the cycle until I test it by imagining that situation again and see whether it's still bringing up the same feelings. And maybe it's not bringing up the same feeling, but maybe it's slightly different. So maybe it started out with, I feel a fear, and then it might transition to where the fear is dissipated, but now I'm noticing an anger or a sadness or some other type of negative emotion. And then I'll just tap through that. So the different points are up on the head, and then the inner eye or eyebrow, the outer eyebrow or edge of the eye, then underneath the eye. And you just tap like 4 or 5 times or whatever while you're saying, you say, this fear of drowning. I'm afraid of water. I feel like I can't breathe. This point is right here where you have those bones. That's what you're supposed to tap on. Fear I can't breathe. And then you go under the arm. Fear I can't breathe. This fear. Feeling fear. Feeling like I can't breathe. Feeling afraid. Feeling overwhelmed. Feeling overwhelmed. Feeling overwhelmed. Feeling this fear. This fear, this fear, this fear. Letting it go. Letting go of this fear. Letting go of this fear of not being able to breathe. Letting go of this fear of not being able to swim. Letting go of this fear of overwhelm. And then you might even grab your wrist and say peace. Now you can do this for any type of feeling. So it can be a physical feeling, in fact. So there have been times where I've been doing this on a regular basis, like daily, and then I've had instances where I wake up in the middle of the night, like at 2, 3 in the morning, and I'll feel, for example, a pain in my leg. I was like, that's weird. Where does this pain come from? I have no idea. But I start tapping just on this pain in my leg, this pain on my leg, this pain on my inner thigh, this pain. So it's a physical pain. I start tapping through it, and I notice sometimes that the pain will just dissipate, and then all of a sudden I'll feel an emotion. So sometimes it'll turn to an emotion of sadness or anger or something like that, and I just continue to tap. And I tap on the actual emotion until that emotion subsides or shifts into some other emotion, and then just continue to do that tap until it's totally gone, till all the emotional energy associated with that pain or whatever just dissipates. Anyway, that's one method that I use and have used for actually several years now to work through a lot of negative emotional energy and past trauma. It's helped me deal with issues in my relationships with my mom and dad, neither of whom I've seen since I was 12 years old. And yet, even though I have no contact with them, there's residual of issues from when I was a child growing up. And not that they were abusive or anything, but just there's traumas that build up as a child that you can't help but have, because authority figures around you, even though they're doing the best they can with the kids that they've got and with the learning that they've had to train their kids or whatever, I mean, everybody has their own baggage, and so they tend to pass it on to their children in one form or another. So when you start to notice that there's these fears or there's these issues that actually are associated with your relationships from your past, and especially from authority figures, it could be mom, dad, grandparents, aunts, uncles, the church, other family members, maybe sisters, brothers, bullies at school, teachers. Any of these can have a negative effect on you while you're growing up. And by tapping through it, you can actually start to feel release and feel more comfortable in your own skin. So this is a method that I very highly recommend for anybody just trying to get a handle of their emotional state and get to the point where they feel an even keel so that you don't actually have to carry this reactive state with you all the time. So whenever you feel that reaction to whatever it is, it's a feeling of fear or anger or whatever, that sometimes you feel that come up in your chest, your solar plexus. Any type of reaction like that, when you feel triggered, is a great time, if you're in an area where you can do it, to just go ahead and start the tapping. If you're in a place where that doesn't feel comfortable to you, like in a public place or something like that, what you do is, when you're alone, go back and reflect on that scenario and notice the energy behind the emotion that comes up, just reliving it in your mind, and then tap through it, and you'll notice that that has the effect of releasing that negative energy from you and relieving you in your body from that energy. And if you continue to do this on a regular basis with different aspects of emotion that come up, you'll notice more calm in your day. You'll notice that happiness tends to stay with you longer, and that the reactivity of your body to different situations, things that used to trigger you, you'll notice don't trigger you anymore. Or maybe they trigger you a little less, and it just might be that there's some residual that you still need to work through. Anyway, go ahead and try this tapping exercise, because I think you'll find it very effective for your own issues. That's it for today.